Hi, I'm Bobby, and welcome to Dusty Old Movies. As I've been doing this channel, a lot of people have asked me, do I ever watch new movies? And the answer is, of course not. But I understand they're in sound now. Yes, I watch new movies too. And some of them are really excellent. But if I was forced to choose one or the other, I would choose old. And I thought long and hard about it. And here are my top 10 reasons why I think old movies are better. Warning, this list is made up of generalizations, so there are exceptions to every rule. Also, it is geared more towards mainstream Hollywood films, as opposed to independent or foreign films. Reason number 10. We already know what the good ones are. Every year, there are some great movies, some good movies, and some that stink. But through the test of time, we already know what the great old movies are. Because they still survive. They're still shown on TV. Like how It's a Wonderful Life is always shown on TV around Christmas time. And when a movie is 71 years old and is still shown on TV every year, you know that's a really good sign. Also, they're available on DVD. They have merchandise. Like how the Universal Monsters have the Funko guys. And they're on lists like the American Film Institute's Top 100 movie lists. So you don't have to pick out a movie and hope it's good. With a couple minutes of research, all the great old movies are picked out for you. Reason number 9, they have opening credits. There's a trend in modern films to skip the opening credits and jump right into the action. But they're really missing out. Opening credits do more than just tell you who's in the movie. Between the music and the images, they set the tone and get you in the mood for what you're about to watch. When you watch the opening credits to the 10 Commandments, bum, 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 you are ramped up for a historical epic. Or when you watch the opening credits to Psycho, you feel like you're going to get a glimpse into a man's insanity. It builds your anticipation of things to come, sometimes in very creative ways, and it's part of the fun of watching a movie. Reason number 8, you learn about history. When you live in a society, sometimes you're so entrenched in it that you can't see the forest for the trees. But when you know your history, you have a more well-rounded perspective. And when you watch old movies, you just kind of pick up things. Not necessarily major events like you're taught in history class, but little things. Like the attitudes that people had, the fashions, the customs, and different aspects of how life used to be. I learned something very fascinating when watching All About Eve. So you're going to Hollywood. Why? Is it the money? 80% of it will go to taxes. I was never taught that in school, and I never would have thought to look up what the tax rate was in 1950. But when you watch All About Eve, you find it out. And then you can do further research, and then you have a more informed opinion on the United States tax system. Reason number 7, the shots are longer. According to the Century of Cinema website, the average shot length in modern films is 2.5 seconds. And the average shot length in films from 1930 is 12 seconds. And there's a bit of a hike in the 1950s. While the shorter shots make for faster pacing, you don't get to see the actors interact as much. In the old days, actors got to exchange quite a bit of dialogue with each other. You get more out of their performances this way because you can see them act and react. And by just looking around in the shot, you get to see for yourself the relationships between the characters. So you know that the Ghost and Mrs. Muir and the King and Anna love each other, not because of the lines or the specific shot that the director wants you to look at, but because of how they act when they're together. It makes their relationship seem more real, and as a result, you care about them more. Reason number 6, the use of implication. In modern films, you can show sex, violence, bowel movements, almost anything you can think of. You might get an R rating, but you can still show it. But in the old days, there was a production code. This started in 1930, but it really got strict in 1934. And what it was a code of conduct of what you could show and what you could not show in movies. So the directors and writers would find ways to outsmart the production code. And they did this by just implying controversial material. In the movie Rope, the main characters, who are killers, are gay. Now Hitchcock couldn't just come out and say they were gay, so he makes the post-murder scene like a post-romantic evening scene. where Brandon lights up a cigarette and feels invigorated, and then Philip feels vulnerable and wants to keep the lights off for a moment. That is such a creative way to get the message across, and they would do this kind of thing all the time. So the stories would have these extra layers to them. They don't take the time to explore them. Instead, you have to read between the lines. So it has more of a book-like quality where you're mentally engaged in the story. Also, comedians like Mae West and Groucho Marx would use dirty humor, but once again would just imply the naughtiness, with plays on words, so it never seemed vulgar. We took some pictures of some native girls, but they weren't developed. But we'll be back again in a couple of weeks. What an ingenious way to say you're a dirty old man! I'm not in favor of censorship, but I absolutely love the creativity it inspired. Reason number 5. No computer-generated images, or as the hipsters call it, CGI. Now I know some old movies do have some bad special effects. A classic example is in old horror movies, where they have a rubber bat on a string and you can sometimes see the string. But there's bad CGI too. And for my money, bad CGI is when you could tell it's CGI, and it looks just as stupid as that rubber bat on a string. But at least you could tell that the rubber bat is really there. It has weight to it, and a kind of charm where you could laugh at it. Whereas all bad CGI is distracting. Now some CGI is terrific, but on the same token, some of the practical effects in old movies are terrific too. Like the tornado in 1939's The Wizard of Oz, or the early green screen effects in 1933's The Invisible Man, and the stop-motion animation in 1933's King Kong. They might not always look perfect, but the fact that they pulled them off with the limited technology that they had available gives them a how did they do that quality that CGI doesn't have, because you know how they did it. Taking aluminum, latex, foam rubber, and rabbit fur and putting them together with your bare hands and some tools and creating an unforgettable monster like King Kong is just cooler to me and has more character to it than creating a monster in a computer does. Reason number 4. They could be in black and white or in color. They've been making color movies since the 30s, but color did not become mandatory until color television became popular. So for a very long time, it could go either way. Black and white was cheaper, so that was a factor, but another factor was what suited the story better. Black and white has this amazing ability to create a heightened reality, an atmosphere, and to show the inner demons and desperations of the characters. And certain stories are just perfect for it. Just look at the spooky atmosphere that black and white creates in Dracula, or the mood that black and white creates in Casablanca, with all those great shadows. Of all the gin joints and all the towns and all the world, she walks into mine. These images are more powerful in black and white. Now when a movie was better suited for color, and it had the budget, they would do it in color, and they make good use of it. Musicals and some period films were often done in color. And it absolutely makes the forest and Robin Hood just come alive, and it gives a fantasy quality to movies like The Wizard of Oz and Singing in the Rain. Oh Moses supposes his noses are roses, but Moses supposes erroneously, but Moses supposes his noses are roses, as Moses supposes his noses to be. Black and white and color are better at accomplishing different things, and very often it was part of the film's artistic statement, and I wish we could go back to it. Reason number 3, the writing was stronger. In the days before big action scenes and big CGI effects, what made a movie good was the writing. In those days, they didn't have to worry about being marketable to young people or having a super fast pacing. All they needed was a good story with interesting characters, and they let the situation play out. Some stories were simple, some were complex, some were silly, and some had powerful ideas behind them, but they were almost always interesting. The writers were extremely creative, but just like today, they would sometimes go to other sources for inspiration. Now today they generally go for either older movies and remake them, or they go to comic books and adapt them. But in the old days, they typically went for either books or plays. Think of the old horror films, Dracula, Frankenstein, The Invisible Man. They're all based on books, and naturally, some of the literary themes were carried over into the film. So the movies themselves have more of a literary quality and a level of sophistication that you would generally find in either a good book or a good play. The final part that makes the writing better is the dialogue. Now, old movies are talkier, and you're supposed to pay attention to what they're saying. And because the dialogue is more important, it's better written. It's not exactly how people talk, it's more well worded. It has snap, and it has wit. How could you talk if you haven't got a brain?
I don't know, but some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
Some of the most dramatic movies, like Casablanca, are hilarious because the dialogue is so sharp. They used to say that on Broadway, the word was king, and that carried over into old movies. Reason number 2, the one-of-a-kind actors. Now, modern actors are great, and most of them can play almost anything. But each person is different, and in the old days, they would embrace the actor's unique personality, their unique talents, and their persona. So most of the main stars were truly one-of-a-kind. There are too many to list, so I'm just going to give you a few examples.
Take Harpo Marx of the comedy team The Marx Brothers. On screen, he didn't talk, he would use pantomime and props, and, like his name implies, he also had a passion for playing the harp. And they would write in a harp solo in almost every Marx Brothers movie, so he got to show off his talent. Then there's the epitome of masculinity, John Wayne, and the tough-as-nails, hard-drinking, and hard-smoking Bette Davis, who threw herself into her roles, but always had this dramatic flair.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
And then, of course, there's my favorite, the charismatic Bela Lugosi, who infused his roles with intensity, darkness, and weirdness, and also had that great line delivery in his genuine Hungarian accent.
The spider, spinning his web for the unwary fly. The blood is the life, Mr. Renfield.
They were larger than life, and I find that appealing. When thinking of artists, and I mean like actors, writers, singers, etc., 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 I always prefer the ones that put their own personal stamp on what they create. And that's what those stars did. As talented as he is, there's going to be more actors who play Ben Affleck type roles. But there's never going to be another Harpo Marx, or another Cary Grant, or another Bela Lugosi. Their individuality makes them irreplaceable. Reason number 1. You get to see how things were done for the first time. Most movies or TV shows, even if they're not remakes, draw some inspiration from older films. But when you watch the older movie, you get to see how it was originally done.
La La Land is great and is very reminiscent of old-time musicals, but then take a look at Singin' in the Rain. Singin' in the Rain was made by the people who invented old-time musicals. Sure, people have copied and homaged the Gene Kelly dancing style, but this is Gene Kelly doing the Gene Kelly dancing style. In modern films, you could see people doing homages to Three Stooges jokes. Or, you could watch old movies and watch the Three Stooges do Three Stooges jokes. You can see the first superhero movies. You can see the first fantasy films. And you can see the first horror films.
Look, it's moving. It's alive. It's alive. It's alive.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! In the name of God, now I know what it's like to be God!
They didn't have a backlog of millions and millions of films to fall back on. They had to use their imaginations to create these movies, to create filmmaking techniques, and to create entire genres. They laid the foundation for everything that came afterwards. They're the originators, and that's the number 1 reason why they're better. For those who agree with me that old movies are better, we may share some of the same thoughts on this subject. For those who don't, that's fine, but I do hope this list makes you appreciate old movies a little bit more. So, thank you for watching my show, and have a groovy day.